we have Dr. Michael Allen. So Michael Allen, obviously one of the pioneers in our industry. So who has used authorware or got started with authorware way back in the day? All right. So back in school when I was working on my graduate work and all that good stuff for all these things, and my final project was in authorware, and it was called Gucci or Not, Here I Come. That was the name of my course, and you had to match up drag and drop clothing articles over to the Italian spellings or whatever it was, all built in authorware. I remember studying the different instructional design approaches and all of that, and hearing his name. He's been in this industry for a long time, and I believe through the interactions we've had together that he feels a profound stewardship and I say a stewardship for the industry, where he really feels like his mission is to help us build content that's more memorable and meaningful, and that he truly wants this industry to be a rock star industry, that he really wants us to know how to build content that is amazing and that can capture our learners' attention, and it can do all the things that we've been hearing this morning. And obviously he's been around for a long time, seen a lot of the different fads come and go. I'm excited to hear him talk about his experience and to kind of draw on his experience of seeing all these different things happen, and to really know where the industry is and how to get there and how learners actually do connect with our content. It's a real privilege to have Michael Allen with us today.
Founder and CEO of Allen Interactions, our next presenter has been a pioneer of the e-learning industry for more than 45 years, in addition to leading teams of doctorate-level specialists in learning research, instructional design, computer-based training, and human engineering. He has authored 8 top-selling books on e-learning and won a number of industry awards, including ATD's Distinguished Contribution to Workplace Learning and Performance Award, the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, and the Guild Masters Award. Please welcome to eLBX, Dr. Michael Allen.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow, lunch is near. Any questions? Wow, I attend a lot of conferences, as I imagine many of you do, and I just don't have an experience like I did this morning. Good speakers, solid information, usable information, and so on. I hope you feel the same way. I think it was terrific. And a little bit difficult to know what to do at the end now after hearing all of this. I thought about maybe just pitching the presentation I have and answering some questions and just talking. But there are a few things that I'd like to share with you that I think can make a difference. I do feel that anything I can do to help avoid a boring learning experience anywhere, anytime, is a good use of my time. Because boring experiences don't work. You know, you cannot learn a person. It's not because the grammar is wrong, it's because they have to do it. And if we use a learner's time ineffectively, they can't come back and say, give me a refund, I'd like my time back. You've spent their time for them and they'll never get it back. So it's a huge responsibility what we do. And we need to not do the things that we know aren't going to work. So I think Angel's message is really right on point. It's a profession that we're in, and we have to hold ourselves to certain standards. And what we do is really important to not just us, but potentially thousands of people. You know, when we used to just deliver instruction in a classroom, we could only do damage to a limited number of people, right? But with this technology and its broadcast, we can use, millions of human hours. And if we waste it, just think of the missed opportunities that there were for the individuals as well as society and so on. So huge responsibility. And yet I think our work can be so much fun, so gratifying. So imagine this, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story here. I have lots of anecdotes over these years, and I love to relive them myself. So I'll enjoy this. Hope you do too as well. But imagine inner city Los Angeles schools where some gangs were in classrooms and teachers were terrified, really physically terrified of what would happen every day. It's a bad period, a bad place to be, and yet trying their best to teach. And we had a chance to do some work with what was then the Plato system that I was working with, and we put some computer terminals in the classroom to help with certain skill development. And an experience went this way. There was a gang leader in the classroom. He would never answer a question, of course. He was too good for that. And pretty much directed what happened in the classroom from the back of the classroom. And he was on one of these computers studying his mathematics. And the bell rang, and class got up and left, but he didn't. He stayed at that computer. And so the teacher said, you don't like mathematics. This class is over. You need to move on. He didn't respond at all. She said, you really need to go. I need this for another class. Didn't respond at all. As she was taught to do when there was a difficult situation, she went down to get the principal. The principal came down, and she said, Butch, you need to go, and didn't respond again. So she tried to pull his chair back, and he grabbed onto the table and would not go. So finally, she said, I don't understand you. You just got to get out of here. And he said, I'm not going, and with more colorful words than that. And she said, well, I just don't understand why you won't move on and let this for somebody else. You don't like doing this. And he said, for the first time in this place, somebody understands me. And she said, oh, well, yes, I do understand you, although I just don't understand this moment why you won't move on. And he said, you blank person, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about this. It gets me. Whoa, what is that? And it turned out that the software was adjusting to his individual abilities. He was difficult in the classroom because he couldn't bear the thought of looking stupid in front of all his gang members. So he would never answer a question. He would always make trouble to avoid that situation. But he was studying an interactive program and making progress that he felt and he could see, was using his time obviously very, very well. To the point at which he ordered the other gang members to get on those terminals and learn their math. To the point that his gang won a California state math competition. We can do this, right? We can do this. I can tell you so many stories where really good instructional experiences have changed people's lives in important ways. So achieving corporate goals should be nothing, compared to the potential that we have in front of us. But we need to use the technology well, as everybody has been saying this morning. And I've been trying over the years to simplify what needs to be done, to write simple rules, to put out examples and so forth. And I hoped it's helped, but I'm not done working on that. How many of you would happen to know what CCAF stands for? I won't ask you to. Yeah, thank you. So CCF, I'll talk about in just a minute, is context, challenge, activity, feedback. In many ways, that's all you need to know, I think. That's a way to design a good learning experience with those four components. Some of you will know the 3 M's. MMM, how many of you would know the 3 M's? Not so, yes, not so many. Meaningful, memorable, motivational. You need to look at your work always. We need to look at our work always. Is it meaningful to the individual? Is it memorable? You know, if you can't remember what you learned, then you might as well have gone out for a picnic, right? Because you wasted your time. We know how to help people remember things. Is it motivational? If it doesn't change their behavior, if they don't put it into practice, then again, have a picnic. You know, if it's not MMM, meaningful, memorable, motivational, then it doesn't matter, right? So these are really important. So what I wanted to share, and I'll do it very, very quickly with you, is that there is a science behind this. It isn't just our axioms that we've come up with and we think work really well, although in many cases that is true. But there's science behind it that if you're fighting a budget, if you're fighting a timeline, and so on, you can point to solid research that says this works, that doesn't, and maybe you'll get more support, we can hope. But it's a little bit more than just common sense. I think it's really important that we realize that it's not just intuition of what might work for a good learning experience. We have science behind it. And so I thought that maybe I'd present that a little bit more. My first question of you, though, is what is the most costly, unaffordable instruction? Somebody? I can't hear. Instructor-led. Instructor-led is very expensive, right? Anything else? Well, I heard some fun. Ineffective. Ineffective because you lose all the development time, but more importantly, you lose all the learning time where those people could be doing something far more productive. This is what we really cannot afford, is instruction that doesn't work. So what doesn't work? What we really know doesn't work is just presenting a lot of information followed by a quiz. Angel pointed that out in her diagram there, and others have alluded to it as well. Presenting a lot of information and then putting a quiz at the end results in very rapid forgetting, if in fact you remembered anything at all, right? Now there's a very simple fix to this. It doesn't cost anything. But what's the most common instruction that we see out there today? Well, it's presentations and quizzes, right? This is just what everybody does. And those of us who have been building authoring tools over the years have made this extremely easy to do. Extremely easy to do. And in fact, I retired some years ago thinking after building tools that were being used widely, I can pat myself on the back for any successes out there because I've made that easier to do and maybe I helped a little bit. And then I looked to see what people were doing, and they were doing things that I just abhor. I mean, they're just terrible. You know? So now I go from feeling proud of myself to feeling guilty, you know, because I didn't mean to enable doing that kind of stuff that wastes people time, wastes learners' time, and everybody's time as far as that goes. So we need to do some things that make this work, right? And we need to stay within reasonable budgets. I'm not arguing that we need to up our budgets by tenfold or something, although I'd love to see that, and it might actually pay back. But we have to find reasonable, workable means to do things that have proper effect. So first thing is I want to point to some resources that are recent and really good. One of my favorite books is Make It Stick. If you haven't read Make It Stick, you ought to. It's a little bit on the science researchy side. So if you don't like that, reading in that style, then you might read Clark Quinn's newest book that's just out, Millennials, Goldfish, and Other Training Misconceptions. He takes it to a more readable level with lots of examples. I think he's just done a masterful job. But I also really like Urban Myths. About learning and education. It's terrific. And not least, for sure, is all the work that Will Thalheimer is doing. in his online websites and in his books. One of them that he wrote is about smile sheets and how disastrous they are, but in a constructive way, he shows us how to make them really useful and meaningful. So everybody that's in a design role really ought to be familiar with the work in these 4 publications, I think. So I recommend them to you very strongly. Okay, so let me extract a few of the things from those particular resources that I think are really important and that you should know. One of them, now these are heavily researched, again, I have to say this, so these are foundational. Learning takes effort. And actually, the more effort you put into it, the more it pays off. Which is sort of the opposite of what we used to think, because we want to make learning easy. And Carl mentioned this as well. If it's too easy, it doesn't stick. There's nothing happens there. So what we need to do almost more than anything is motivate people to want to learn. You don't just start out with, today we're going to learn these 10 principles and start listing the 10 principles and think you've done a really good job, because they won't stick. And in fact, I'm running that risk right now because I'm sort of doing that. I want to point out that I am self-aware that that's going on. And if we had more time, I would be playing games with you as we go through this material to show you how applying some of these applications really help make them stick. But I'm trusting you that you will do the work that you need in order to remember this material or have it accessible in a way, because it's very important. So what we really need to do is to gear people up to do the work. Games are one way to do that, because people lose track of time and they try to solve the problem or find the murderer or whatever the game is about. And what's important about that is that they're putting effort into it. Now, if the effort focuses on the game, however, and not the skills you're trying to build, then games can be wasteful. So just because it's a game doesn't mean it's a good learning experience. When there's a big difference. And that's a whole field of study in and of itself that, as some of you know, I've been writing about quite a bit recently about good games and bad games. Another thing that's really interesting is that we are not good judges of when we're learning well and when we're not, which relates to the smile sheet. So if you ask people, was this a really good course or was this a really good module, their feedback doesn't mean much because they're not good judges of it. It's their performance, their subsequent performance that's the measure that you care about, not their assessment, because their assessment is very likely to be erroneous. So you really shouldn't waste your time. In fact, I'm really opposed to post-tests in general, but that's another subject. So time for that. Reading and rereading is not a really good way to study, and that's what I did in college. And I'd read the stuff and read the stuff and read the stuff for a test and take the test, and 2 days later, I'm sure glad the test wasn't on that day because I couldn't remember much of the stuff anyway. So we use our brains in very efficient ways for purposes. And if we are studying for a test, the day after the test, we often find no need for that information to hang around anymore, and we clear out space. It's phenomenal how quickly we will forget things that are tested the day after if there's no need for that. So here's a little trick, which would be fun, again, to do here, but I don't have time, which is just tell people that at a certain time after the course, they're going to be tested. You don't need to do the testing. Just tell them. Well, lie maybe, right? But you could tell people 3 weeks after the completion of this course, your performance will be evaluated against the objectives and expectations of this course. Just telling them that will cause them to use their brain in a different way, and it will become much more meaningful, memorable, and motivational to them. But if they think the test is right at the end of the course, they will use their brain in a different way. We will use our brains in a different way, and we'll forget it, right? So it's very interesting that just reading over and over and over again, or studying, or even practicing all at one time is a very, very ineffective way to learn. We also know that retrieval practice is far more efficient. So if we put the screen blank right now and we ask some of you what are some of the principles we talked about, that would really help that person remember it for a longer period of time, right? Not reading from your notes now. So if you put them down and you just think a minute, can you remember any of the points? Well, you can look at the icons at the bottom of the screen. It would help. And again, I would walk around and ask some of you. Now, that puts people at risk. If you think I'm going to come and point to you and ask you one, what happens in your head? Your head starts scrambling like crazy trying to remember all the things, and you look for all your options like, oh, could I look like I have a stomach ache? Could I think, oh, I've got a phone call and I got to run out? You start thinking about all of your options. And that's really what we want learners to do, is be thinking about all of their options. And we don't want them thinking about leaving, of course, but anyway, it's another thing. All right. So CCAF, I think, has been, for me, the most useful discovery. And that's, there are 4 really important components to any learning experience. It doesn't matter at all what medium it's in, whether it's e-learning or others. It's that you need a context which answers the question for a learner, is this relevant to me? Does it matter? A context gives you the ability to imagine yourself in that situation. If you can't imagine yourself in the situation, then this course probably isn't for you, because you would never be there, right? Then a challenge. Now, there's another principle that's going to come up here in just a minute, but as Carl said, I think, that explaining things up front is boring. Putting a challenge up front is interesting, because now you start to think about it. Now, if that kid in the Los Angeles classroom wasn't finding that software adapting to him, he would not have had that kind of connection, and that whole event would not have happened. But what that software was doing is asking who he was, in a sense. What can you do? And it was finding out what he could and couldn't do, and it was adapting the level of challenge to work for him. Now, we can write software like that, and we always should. It's an obligation. It's not just putting up facts and asking people if they can answer questions about them. That just doesn't work, and it wastes everybody's time. Well, there's a lot more about CCAF, but I just want to relay just a few more principles. My time is really up. But exacting the rules or principles is one of the ways that you allow people to generalize their knowledge. We usually want people not to be able to do just the one specific or 2 or 3 specific things we're teaching them to, but we want them to be able to act as if they had enough expertise, so if something goes wrong, they can handle it. If a situation isn't exactly textbook, they can still handle it. And so we need people to extract the level of what are the principles that are being applied here, not just being able to do one task at a time. Very important, really, to build expertise. A way to do that is to interleave practice. So, as we were talking before, just rereading and studying and practicing in a mass period is not good. So what does a typical course look like? It goes topic 1, then it goes topic 2, goes topic 3. That's really bad. Again, one of the most common ways of going about it is really, really bad. What is so much more effective, and the research proves this to us over and over and over again, is that you should just do a little bit of topic 1, go on to topic 2, or go on to something else, come back to topic 1, review it and elaborate, and then go on to something else. The something else can even be dismissal. Go away go do your job, go do something else, and come back. But interleaving, if you notice, like topic 1, the spacing gets larger and larger and larger as you go along. That leads to permanent retention of skills and memory. And again, this is really not hard to do. It's really not hard to do. It's just you need to do it. So blocked sequencing of content is just amazingly inefficient and effective. And interleaved is just the opposite. And let's see, we about got it here. Oh, yes, we are susceptible to illusions of what we can and cannot do. So have you ever taken a course where they're showing a piece of software and you're supposed to follow along and do it, and you think, oh, I got this. I can do just what they did. And then you go try to do it an hour later, and you find out, geez, I was sure I could do this because, I could follow along and it seemed fine. And now you find out you can't do it at all. We're really, really poor judges of what we've learned and what we can and cannot do. So that's why we need to give people adaptive feedback so they can understand what they need to do. I'm really flying through a lot of content here, I realize, but really important for you to at least make a list, if you can, of this. So all new learning builds on foundation of prior knowledge. You know that. Again, if the gang leader had not found any ability to respond to the material because he had no background, he probably would have thrown the computer out the window or had his gang stomp on it and smash it and so forth. Really would have. But it did find what his foundation was, and then it built on it. Further, just recall is one way to enhance what you know and remember, but elaborating on it is even more powerful. Take a piece of knowledge and expand on it in your head, like write a story about it, write a synopsis about it, try to teach it to somebody else. All of those tools really help you learn. And finally, making mistakes is really great. So we talked about it not being too easy. It should be hard enough that you make mistakes. It's really good. We did some training for Apple some years ago on sexual harassment, training of managers, and they said, our trainers are going to hate this because it starts out with a simulation and somebody asks you as you're walking down the hall, I'm being harassed and I need your attention right now. What are you supposed to do? And the correct answer to that is arrange to talk to the person later. But almost everybody says something about talk to them immediately. And that turns out to be a wrong answer. And they thought, our people are going to call in and say they hate this training because it's telling them everything they do is wrong. And I say, really? You think people are going to call in and tell you how much they need this training? Well, yeah. And so they went with it. Thank goodness it worked. They said it rolled out the best that they'd ever had, and people actually completed it at higher numbers and went through it because it immediately revealed to them that just common sense wasn't enough to be successful. So that's really just a sampling of the things that you'll find in what I think are some really, really good resources. I hope you'll take a look. I wouldn't mind if you looked at some of my books, but I'm really pleased that the guides and some of the others have been so very popular. But online also is the eLearning Manifesto. And you should all know that. If you haven't been to the eLearningmanifesto.org, it talks about principles that we must adhere to as a profession, and it invites you to comment on the principles that you find there. And if you endorse them, you can put your name as a signatory to the manifesto, and I certainly invite you to do that. But there's some very good material on the manifesto. So again, remember, what we can't afford is training that doesn't work. Just putting up information and some quizzes just doesn't work. It wastes everybody's time. So that's very important. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.